Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Aldridge, the Opinion and Engagement Editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer, and I'd like to welcome you to the Enquirer's 2021 virtual mayoral debate. 5 of the 6 candidates vying to be mayor of Cincinnati are here for the next hour to discuss some of the most pressing issues facing our city. I'll introduce them in just a moment, but first let me quickly go over the format for today's debate. Each candidate will receive 90 uninterrupted seconds to answer questions from our distinguished panel. None of the questions have been shared with the candidates prior to today's debate. As moderator, I'll be keeping time and will sound a bell with 10 seconds remaining in each answer, indicating the candidate needs to wrap up his remarks. 30-second rebuttals will be allowed at the discretion of the moderator. Each candidate will receive 1 minute at the conclusion of the question and answer segment to make their closing statement. The order in which candidates will receive questions and give their final statements was selected at random prior to today's debate. All of the candidates have agreed to the rules and the format that has been set forth today. Now, before we begin, I'm honored to introduce our panel of questioners. Up first, we have the Enquirer's City Hall reporter, Sharon Coolidge. Also asking questions today will be our political columnist, Jason Williams. Proud to have both of my colleagues joining me today in this important discussion. Thanks, guys. And now the candidates. We extended an invitation to participate in today's debate to all 6 mayoral candidates, and 5 of them accepted. Dr. Herman Najoli, an educator from West Price Hill, informed us that he would be unavailable to join us today. But we are glad to be joined today by State Senator Cecil Thomas of North Avondale. Senator Thomas is a Democrat currently representing Ohio's 9th Senate District. He is a former Cincinnati police officer, Cincinnati councilman, and a former head of the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission. Next, we have Aftab Pureval of Clifton. Mr. Pureval is currently serving as the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. He was first elected in 2016, defeating a popular Republican incumbent and re-elected in 2020. Up next, we have Gavi Begtrup of Mount Lookout. Mr. Begtrup is a small business owner, PhD physicist, and the former policy advisor to Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Next, we have Mr. Raffel Prophett of Avondale. Mr. Prophett is a retired Cincinnati Fire Department district chief and a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. David Mann of Clifton. Mr. Mann has served on Cincinnati City Council off and on for the past 26 years. He was mayor from 1980 to 1982 under a system in which council's top vote getter was the mayor. He served as Ohio's 1st Congressional District U.S. Representative from 1993 to 1995, and he is currently the chairman of Council's Budget and Finance Committee. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. Now, let's get started with what the people of Cincinnati have come to see. Our first question will come from Sharon Coolidge and will deal with affordable housing and issue 3. And the first question will go to State Senator Cecil Thomas.
Hi, Cecil.
Hello, Sarah.
One of you will be the next mayor of Cincinnati and will have to deal with the aftermath of voters' decision on issue 3, the affordable housing amendment. If issue 3 passes, what places in the budget would you first seek to take the $50 million or more from? And if that fails, what is the one thing you would immediately seek to reduce to reduce the shortage of affordable housing?
Wow, that's a tough question when you say what areas of the budget would I begin to take money from? I would first and foremost look at all of our basic services and make sure that we are not putting ourselves in a situation where we would have to put the city and the community in serious danger, if you will, regarding our basic services. And so when you ask that question, I would have to convene all of my staff from the city manager to all of the department heads. And then we would have to sit down at the table, every representative of every department, and say, where can we make cuts that would not jeopardize the safety and the quality of life of our citizens. That would be the way I would approach that. And the other portion of the question, I believe it was, if you can repeat that, where was that other portion that you threw out there?
What would you do to reduce the amount of the shortage of the affordable housing?
The first thing I would do is look at the recommendations of lists. The Greater Cincinnati Foundation sponsored a study that LIST put out in 2018, and I would put that study into action. It's just that simple, and I believe that's critically important. Thank you.
All right, the same question will go next to Mr. Pureval.
Thanks, Kevin, Sherry, Jason, and to the Enquirer for giving us this platform. I don't support issue 3. I do support affordable housing, and I do understand the frustration that those who do support issue 3 feel, because people are truly suffering because of a lack of affordable housing in the city. I see it every day in the courthouse at eviction court. I see single mothers and their children evicted and rendered homeless in the middle of a pandemic. And I see legacy communities who have lived in a community for decades be challenged because their property taxes are going up. Now, if issue 3 passes, instead of reaching immediately to start cutting things, I think we've got to take a look at the $290 million coming to us from the federal government and certainly use that money first before we even consider cutting our basic services. But fundamentally, we need a strategy that brings us all together to get serious about funding the trust fund. We have to leverage city dollars to partner with our local banks and universities and local institutional philanthropies that already have community development funds. We need leadership to say, this is a priority. This is what the city needs to fund, and we need your help. When you look at the big transformational changes that the city has made, preschool promise, the transit levy, it's always public-private partnerships. I think that's what we need here, but we can't stop there. A comprehensive plan will also require a review of the city's development incentives, like TIF and tax abatements, to ensure that we are not only incentivizing growth, but also equity. Thank you.
Excellent. The same question goes to Mr. Begtrup.
You know, as someone who's built a school, as somebody who's built businesses, when I think about affordable housing, I think about how it affects families. When a family has access to affordable housing, their kids grow up in a more stable home. When their kids grow up in a more stable home, they do better in school, and then they do better in the workplace, and they earn higher wages, and they break the cycle of poverty. Everything starts with housing first. I've seen it in our schools where some kids don't show up, month to month because they're moving from couch to living room because they don't have access to affordable housing. We have an affordability crisis here in Cincinnati at every level. And the trust fund is but one piece of solving that. Now, when the trust fund charter amendment came out, I called on City Hall to do something, do anything to show the 9,500 people who came out in the pandemic to sign this thing that they were serious about solving the problem. 3 years ago, City Hall created a trust fund, and in that same ordinance said they were going to figure out how to fund it, but they never did it. City Hall just doesn't solve problems until there's a tragedy because they're too busy squabbling and thinking about their political careers. So I do support the charter amendment. I support it because it's become clear that City Hall will not act on this unless they're forced to. Now, should it pass, we will immediately look at fixing it in November. But more importantly, whether it passes or not, as mayor, I will figure out every source to fund this without cutting basic services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Begtrup. The question next goes to Mr. Raffel Prophett.
Yes, thanks. So I think the question was about coming from the budget. But let's just first set the stage. Issue 3 is a result of failed leadership. the leadership of the city in years to get at the affordable housing crisis. The data shows that about 45% of the city is African American, and over 50% of those African Americans are cost burdened when it comes to their housing. That means they're spending over 30% of their income, which includes utilities, on housing. And over 20% of them are severely cost burdened, spending over 50% of their income towards housing. And so, but I will say, as I said, and I believe I was the first to strongly endorse issue 3, because it's our first opportunity in decades to get at the crisis. It's not perfect, but it's a start, and we can fix it. We can amend it, tweak it, repurpose it as we do. I've learned in the military to do if you're really serious about getting at an effort. And so it will not come from the budget. Well, we will use examples for scores and scores of cities who have, determined and created structural, or I should say, funding mechanisms to fund these trust funds that they have created. And with a professional staff, getting a professional city manager, we haven't had one in I think the last 3. Bring that professional staff together, and we will figure out what is the best way to fund affordable housing. It won't come from the current budget.
Thank you. Lastly, the question will go to Mr. Mann in his first question.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank the Enquirer for giving the opportunity to engage with you and with the voters of this community and those who have taken the time to tune in. Thank you. This is one of the most important elections this city has ever had, so we appreciate it. Issue 3 will create many problems. I am against it. Number one, it would take $50 million forever each year from our general fund budget and require that it be spent on one item. Our general fund budget is only $400 million, so it's 1/8 of our dollars, and we cannot do that without impacting basic services, as the city manager laid out in a detailed memorandum. Secondly, decisions about that $50 million and its uses will be made by a 11-person board, 9 of whom are selected by outside agencies who are not, and the members of the board are not accountable to anybody. They can make decisions about how to spend the money. They can make decisions about contracts, and under the language of the charter amendment, the city manager is required to sign them. We have to pursue a different path. I have been a strong advocate for the city getting involved in producing affordable housing. There's a real need, and in 2017, the Affordable Housing Association gave me a award for the work that I was doing. Because of I drafted the legislation that created the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I drafted legislation that imposes a tax on Airbnbs, the revenues of which is devoted exclusively to affordable housing. We have many paths that we are pursuing. It's a real problem, and we are addressing it and will continue to.
Thank you, Councilman Mann. Our next question will come from Jason Williams and will be on the topic of policing and the collaborative agreement. And the question will go first to Mr. Pureval.
Hey, Aftab and the candidates, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate this. In the wake of the Derek Chauvin verdict, the national conversation around police community relations, potential federal reform of police departments across the country is intensifying. Cincinnati, it's a collaborative agreement, has been held up as a model in this country. Yet some have been critical of the city's ongoing financial support of the agreement. As mayor, would you invest more in the collaborative and police community relations? And if so, in what ways?
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate the question. This is so important and timely. COVID has shown a light on the long-standing racial inequities in our society, in our housing, in our economic, and yes, in our justice system. You only need to look at the names Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. The names change every year, but the color never does. It's always Black men and women, and sometimes children, unjustly losing their liberty, or in some instances, their very lives. I don't support defunding the police, but I do support reforming and improving the police. And the great news is, as you mentioned, here in Cincinnati, we've got the landmark collaborative agreement. We have a framework to push us forward. But in order to reform and improve the police so that every single neighborhood is safe, we've got to get back to the fundamentals of the agreement. Right now, the Citizen Complaint Authority is underfunded and understaffed. Yes, I would fully fund it. It can't live up to its charge of being an independent and outside organization that investigates and holds our department accountable. So we need to fully fund that organization. We also need to make sure we're using our resources efficiently and intelligently by reforming our 911 process. Right now, 911 is only helpful if you're on fire or if your life is in danger. We have to take action on this by making sure police officers are only responding to issues that they're trained for, where they can help. And when they're not, we need to send unarmed, specifically trained professionals. Now, this won't be easy. When someone calls, it's not always clear what they need, but together we can continue to invest in and reform our public safety system. Thank you.
All right, same question. This time it will go to Mr. Begtrup.
Thank you for this question. Just following Derek Chauvin, to see this moment in our nation where it appears like justice is starting to be served, to then immediately get hit by one after another, Dante Wright, and over again, Black young men in particular, losing their lives to the police. I'm no stranger to gun violence. My boss and mentor, Gavi Begtrup, was shot and permanently disabled by a gunman. And my friend Gabe Zimmerman lost his life in that same shooting. So I know the pain, but I cannot imagine how unbearable it must be to lose a loved one or friend to the same people who are supposed to protect and serve. So we must lead on this issue. 20 years ago, we started working on police reform, but the city let up as soon as the court stopped forcing us. We must come back to the collaborative agreement. We can lead the nation on this issue. We have the structure. As mayor, I will be a full partner in the collaborative agreement. I will fully fund the Citizen Complaint Authority because we have to hold bad actors accountable. It's good for the police and it's good for our community. I've been proud to lead on this issue. In my Cincinnati Recovery Plan, we announced $1 million fund for community-led police reform issues. Wouldn't it be great if we were in the New York Times for having the most progressive police in the nation, as opposed to having the most corrupt city hall in the nation?
Thank you, Mr. Begtrup. Same question will go to Mr. Prophett.
I just want to be clear about the debate moving forward on the previous subject of affirmative housing. Can we challenge a claim that was made?
Sure, go ahead. You still have the same 90 seconds, so you can determine how much of your time you want to use.
Right. So there was, and I know Councilmember Mann said it directly, that the funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the 50 mil that the ballot initiative asks for or requires, says it must come from the general fund. That's what Councilmember Mann says. It's going to come from the general fund. But that's simply only if the city administration does nothing. My question to him and others who keep saying that is, where are the recommendations by our professional city manager? If it passes, what sort of funding streams that we're going to create to meet what the voters who came up, 9,500 folks signed that, right? And then the voters will say yes. What are you going to do other than sending documents to city employees telling them that your jobs will be cut if this thing passes? Where is the creativity that it takes from our professional staff to get at issue 3 in the event that it passes?
Mr. You probably have about 15 seconds left in your time, Mr. Prophett. Would you like to address the question concerning the collaborative? You have 15 seconds.
Well, repeat the question, and I'll try to give you a 15-minute answer.
Wake of the Derek Chauvin verdict, the national conversation has intensified about police community relations and the potential need for the federal government to reform police departments nationwide. We know about the collaborative agreement here in Cincinnati. There's been debate. It's been held up as a national model for how to do police community relations, but there's been a debate and criticism about ongoing funding. Would you invest more in the collaborative? And also, what is your general stance on what you would do with police community relations?
Yeah, as the co-founder of Public Medical, where we seek to transform public safety, we've been around over the years since I retired. I spent my career as a public safety official, always seeking to improve outcomes. It will be done from data analytics.
All right, same question on the collaborative, and this time we'll go with Mr. Mann.
That's a great question, Jason. Obviously, the death of George Floyd, the aftermath, marks a critical moment in our country's history. I think for the first time in a long time, I feel like a lot of corners are going to be turned. And I think it's important to, first of all, recognize the improvements that our police department have undergone in the last 20 years. In so many ways, our police department and its engagement with citizens, its work with them on community problem solving is a national model. That doesn't mean it can't get better. And the important philosophy to keep in mind is continuous improvement. And continuous improvement can only occur if there's a partnership with the political leadership at City Hall, with the police leaders of the police department, and community leaders. Conversations have been and must continue. There won't be complete agreement. There never is. But in my experience, between the time of Timothy Thomas's death and today, there was a tremendous change in the attitudes of police officers. I see that as I talk with them. I had been on council not when Timothy Thomas was killed, but earlier. But there's an embracement, I think, of the value of working with citizens to solve problems, and we're going to keep that up. Yes, funding the community, the Gabe Davis and his agency, and the other elements of the collaborative agreement that have been, to the extent they've been not funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Jason, I believe you had a follow-up question for the candidates, and so we'll give 30 seconds to each candidate to answer your follow-up as it pertains to the police chief.
Yes, Police Chief Elliot Isaac is set to retire later this year. Should the current administration, John Cranley and his administration, hire the new police chief, or should that decision wait until the next administration comes in, which would be one of you as the next mayor if elected?
So that'll go to Mr. Pureval first.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, the current mayor and city manager should absolutely wait. I agree with candidate John Cranley here, who advocated waiting when he was running for mayor the first time. The chief of police is one of the most important members of our city government, and it only makes sense that the new administration has a say in the future of the Cincinnati Police Department.
All right, Begtrup.
You know, if we're we need stake here. We need the people of Cincinnati to elect a mayor who they believe will lead on this, and that mayor should choose the police chief that's going to lead on this. If we're going to lead the nation in police reform, that starts with the team that's all playing on the same team. So absolutely, they should wait. This is not about John's next election. It's about the people of Cincinnati.
All right, next we have Mr. Prophett.
Yeah, so I ditto what Gavi and Aftab says, but I also want to add. Let's take a couple of steps back. When that didn't happen, right? What occurred? I think that a police chief was selected right at the end of the current administration, and that caused all sort of havoc, not only in terms of our city, but within the police department when Blackwell was eventually fired. And some suggested that it was because he was selected before the election instead of afterwards.
All right, and Mr. Mann.
Well, I have to remind my colleagues that under the city charter, the decision about the police chief is not the mayor's. Under the city charter, the city manager is administrative head and the chief executive officer. So the thought that the mayor would make this decision is inconsistent with our charter. Secondly, I think it depends when the vacancy takes place. Obviously, if Chief Isaacs retires at the end of October, it would be appropriate to wait. If he retires June 1st, we're going to have 7 months of absence of a permanent police chief? That seems to me irresponsible.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. I was informed that, and apologetically, that I skipped over Senator Cecil Thomas on the answer on policing and the collaborative. So, Cecil, on this one, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, a minute and a half to answer the question on the collaborative, and then you can kind of seamlessly flow into the answer on the police chief. Is that workable?
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I was one of the individuals involved in formulation of the collaborative agreement, and it would be a huge mistake to even remotely think about going back to a time when we were having difficult situations in our city. Also, I'm glad to hear that the mayor has fully staffed the Citizens Complaint Authority. That is also critically important. Problem-solving policing is the order of the day. It's the 21st century policing. It's reimagined how we do policing. And I'm happy to say that Cincinnati is way ahead of the game. All of our efforts after 2001 to get us where we are today has provided a significant amount of power that we can utilize nationally and internationally as it relates to the collaborative agreement. Add to that, there's a memorandum of understanding that's all part of that, as well as a number of changes to the policies and procedure manuals of the Cincinnati Police Department. As far as the question regarding the chief of police, absolutely, they should hold off appointing a chief of police until the new mayor takes a position. I think that it's critical that the mindset of the chief of police has to continue to flow in the vein of the collaborative agreement. That is critical. Whether it's in-house or a national search, that would be something that we would have to address going forward. How much time? Okay, I thought you said
you still got about 15 seconds if you got one other thing you want to say.
So yes, I was very active during the civil unrest, which helped us formulate the collaborative, and that's the kind of leadership that is needed if we're going to take our city into the 21st century when it comes to policing, and the collaborative agreement is a way to do that.
Thank you, Senator Thomas. And again, my apologies for skipping over you on that last question, completely unintentional. Okay, our next question will come from Sharon Coolidge and will deal with the Kyle Plush incident and 911 Communications Center. And this question will go first to Mr. Begtrup.
Gentlemen, Kyle Plush died a little more than 3 years ago after calling 911 and begging for someone to help save his life. So my question is, the city settled with his family for $6 million, and they hired outside 3 people will be reviewing the 911 center. So my question is, has the city done enough to fix the 911 center in the last 3 years? And will you commit to following the recommendations of the 3 outside experts for the next 5 years?
Thank you for that question. You know, as a father of 3 kids, to imagine, I have a high schooler now at Walnut Hills, and to imagine her in a parking lot suffocating while waiting for 911 to show up, and just the appearance that they treated as a joke and left this kid to die was just, I remember hearing this news, and just, it's heartbreaking. And again, it comes back to a city that serves, a city that doesn't wait for tragedy to strike to do the right thing. I saw this when I was building the Spencer Center, and we couldn't get a crosswalk from City Hall for 3 years because they told us that it wasn't in the budget, it wasn't a priority. 7-year-olds crossing a busy street to get to school wasn't a priority for City Hall. And they didn't act until 13 kids died. We need a City Hall that doesn't wait for kids to die to do the right thing. So absolutely, does the city need to work with the county? Should we listen to the experts? Absolutely. But we need to start working on these issues before children lose their lives. It's the same with police reform. It's the same with affordable housing. It's the same with public transportation. It's the same with safe streets. We are one of the greatest cities in the world, and we need to lead on these issues. So have we done enough? No. Will we do enough in my administration? I sure hope so.
Same question. We'll go to Mr. Prophett.
Yeah, I'll start off with no. We haven't done enough. The plushes, my heart goes out to them. I can empathize. Been my child, how they must have felt it, but they've used that the pain, right, to project a cause, and it's because of their voice, right, that we're able to move forward on making a much better system, and I celebrate them for doing that. But there are a lot of parents out there that don't have that voice. I've seen it as a public first line public safety official, not only as a first line, but as a supervisor and a command officer, that our ability as a city to really improve a lot of these outcomes, right? And so there is a independent source that is looking at that. So I definitely would look at it, seeing that is it meeting the intent that it was called for, right? But I know from my experience, no, we're not doing enough, because we need to analyze every one of these incidents that we have as public safety officials and see how we can use that to best inform us on how to structure our public safety system. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. And it has to start with the values of doing what's right and just and fair.
Thank you. Same question to Mr. Mann.
Sherry, it's a good question. First of all, we have done a lot since the Plus tragedy, and one of the toughest moments of my time in the council was visiting the funeral home at the when the Plus family was accepting visitors and so forth. And it was and my wife happens to have been working at a school with Mrs. Plush. A terrible moment. And all of us, I think, felt helpless. And a lot has been done since then. We spent a lot more on the 911 system. We've improved procedures. It's now possible to tell our officers, our responders, what the exact position is of the location of a cell phone from which a call came in. We've established career paths for the operator, so it doesn't feel like a dead-end job. We've changed supervisors. And yes, we will implement the recommendations of the experts. I think the settlement agreement requires us to do just that. That's appropriate. And again, as with the police, the question is continuous improvement. And that's what we're committed to at the 911 Center.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Same question to Mr. Thomas.
Well, first of all, that was a terrible tragedy. Keep in mind, I always say, there's no exact science to policing, and it's an ever evolving, ever changing based on incidents. Procedures are changed, and things are continuing to evolve. Yes, I would complete those recommendations simply because there's always areas of improvement that we need to get done. But if those recommendations are going to address the immediate issue that's upon us, then absolutely you want to move that forward. We have to understand when officers get these calls, and there's no excuses. I'm not making excuses, but again, though, information is key. And if we are doing everything we can to make sure that the dispatchers are getting the information and getting it out as quickly as possible in a concise and accurate manner, allowing our officers to process that information, that goes a long way. And if there's any way that we can have public-private partnerships with our 911 officers and the internet system, whatever it may take, we need to do that. But yes, I would implement those recommendations immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Lastly, in this round of question, we'll hear from Mr. Pureval.
Thanks, Sherry and Kevin. I'm a new father. My son is 18 months old, and I just cannot imagine losing him. losing him in this way. The tragedy of the Plush family is overwhelming. Kyle called twice, voice activating his phone, and unfortunately, he died. The cause of it was bad management, malfunctioning equipment, poor training, too many unfilled jobs, lousy morale. So yes, of course, we have to do more. And of course, we will implement the recommendations of the third-party audit. But we have to work to make sure that this doesn't happen in the first place. I'm no stranger to taking on a bureaucratic system with lousy morale. When I walked into that clerk of court's office, morale was in the basement. No investments in IT infrastructure, and the service was really, really poor. If you're concerned about basic services like 911, then who better to elect than the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts? It is what I'm laser focused on every single day. Because whether it's the justice system or whether it's 911, our basic services have to work or people get hurt. That will certainly be my priority going into City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Pureval. All right, we'll move on quickly to our next question, which will come from Jason Williams, and will be on the topic of political corruption and misconduct. And that first question will go to Mr. Prophett.
Was our Mr. Prophett, was our city, did the city make the right decision to have a special prosecutor look into the actions related to the Gang of Five text messaging scandal? I should clarify that it was the Hamilton County prosecutor who appointed the special prosecutor at the request of the city administration. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but let me give you my insights into this whole culture of corruption at City Hall. I wrote an op-ed and it ran in the Enquirer a little over a month ago. And I believe an inflection point on this corruption crisis that we face was when we changed to a stronger mayor, council, manager form of government. And in that op-ed, I think I called for this commission that was established by Councilman Mann's motion, that this commission should look a little deeper, right? Not just on this developmental deals, but let's really drill down and determine if this change of structure that we had in our government had precipitated corruption. And I believe that you will find, because of those changes in relationships led to this, right? I mean, council member Young even said it publicly, that the reason why the texting created the Gang of Five was to challenge Cranley's abuse of power. He said that, right? And so, again, I don't know if the prosecutor, what the motive or intent is, but I believe that we really need to drill down and find out what's going on with the structure that we have in place now.
Same question to Mr. Mann.
Well, the point of the special prosecutor was the reality that the city solicitor works for the, among others, the members of council, and had an obvious conflict. So the only way the issue could be addressed was by turning to another governmental legal source, and that's the county prosecutor, who was asked to appoint a special prosecutor. So yeah, sure, I support that. The issues need to be addressed, and they were, and we move on from there. And it's unfortunate that the incidents happened. I think it's very, I don't see what the connection is between the misbehavior with respect to the text messages has to do with the mayor. I mean, if you are unhappy with what the mayor's doing, go to the floor of council and present it publicly. So that seems to be a poor excuse, really.
Thank you, Councilman. Senator Thomas.
Yeah, well, what does the law say if someone violates the law, if that's a question as to whether there's a violation of law, and there's an investigation initiated, and if there's a conflict from the city solicitor, and another investigative body is put in place to investigate it, then I have no problem with that. The question is, was there a violation of law? And if so, you have to deal with that. It's more important, though, that we keep in mind that we have to stay focused on where are we going as a city. This whole issue of corruption and things of that nature, does that really exist in the totality of things? I was on a council for 8 years, and I never found myself in any of these kinds of issues. It's all about integrity as you move forward as a representative with the trust of the people that I'm going to be good stewards over their tax dollars, and I'm going to operate with integrity, honesty, and transparency. So what was going on with the Gang of Five and all of that stuff, I have no idea. The bottom line is that if we continue to operate with honesty and integrity, these issues become moot. Thank you.
Mr. Pureval.
Yeah, Jason, I support the charter amendment to avoid this conflict of interest and appoint a special prosecutor. But corruption is a massive problem holding our city back from what it could be. And it's important to get this right, not just for corruption's sake, although certainly that's important, but because it's holding our city back. If you don't trust your city leaders, you won't invest your dollars here. You won't move here and stay here and raise your family here. So if we want to grow, we've got to get this right. And I applaud the task force that the council and mayor has put together, the charter amendments, but we have to do more. I look forward to the recommendations, but those reforms are reactive, changing the process for responding to corruption after it has occurred. What I think we should be laser focused on is preventing corruption. And the best way to do that is to increase transparency. Right now, our ethics disclosures for local elected officials don't provide enough information to hold our elected officials accountable for relationships with people who might be in front of the city. The first thing we should do is drive more transparency and prevent ethical violations by raising the standard of ethical disclosures. But I'll take it a step further. Our financial disclosures are due today, and I'm posting all of our information after we file on our website in a searchable form to increase transparency and accessibility in the process. That's what I think we need more of in City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Pureval. Lastly, Mr. Begtrup.
The culture of corruption, the culture of squabbling, the culture of just career politician BS, quite frankly, is what's keeping our city from moving forward. We can't solve the real problems in Cincinnati. We can't address the systemic racism, the income inequality, the poverty. We have career politicians telling us that they can't solve the affordable housing crisis. Why? Because they're too busy worrying about their next election. They're too busy worrying about what their donors are going to think. We need to change this. We need a city hall that does the right thing, not when it's convenient, but when it needs done. That's why I'm running the only clean campaign in this race. I'm not taking a dime from developers who have business in front of the city. It's not because I'm anti-development. It's because we need a fair playing field in City Hall. As a small business owner, that's all I would ever want. But when my opponents were asked about taking money from developers, they said they couldn't tell you how many tens of thousands of dollars they took. And then they talk about how somebody else should have higher standards, how when they're mayor, they'll have higher standards for everyone else except for themselves. Leadership is about doing the right thing, doing the hard thing. If we're going to change the culture of corruption, it starts at the top. I've built companies, I've built organizations. Culture starts at the top. When we have a leader who starts with integrity, with honesty, humility, open, trusting, we can change our city. We will end the corruption and get Cincinnati working for the people first.
Thank you, Mr. Begtrup. All right, we'll move on to our next segment. And in this segment, each candidate will receive a question specifically for them. Both Jason and Sharon will be asking questions during this part. And we'll start with Mr. David Mann.
Councilman Mann, I am wondering, what will you do as mayor that you haven't done the last 8 years or your previous time at City Hall? Feel free to say what that big idea is that you want to set this money aside for.
I feel like I've done a lot in my years at City Hall. I described what I've done in the area of affordable housing. I've been involved in the Childhood Poverty Collaborative, Preschool Promise. My earlier careers, I was an advocate for fairness in employment. Last term, I fought for to prohibit employers that cheated their wage earners and the like. What we need in our society, in our city, is equity for all, elimination of discrimination, and a pathway to succeed by employment opportunity, educational opportunity, and the like. So that's the framework with which I approach the job. It's a job that requires a lot of work. It's a job that I think is best not learned on the job. And as you know, I've been privileged to serve the community in a number of ways for many years, in council, as mayor for 3 years in the United States Congress, and before that, 4 years in the Navy. Service is in my DNA, and that's exactly how I'll approach the job, 24/7. As long as God gives me breath, that's my purpose in life.
All right, Jason has a question for Senator Thomas.
Senator Thomas, your experience as a police officer, you and I have talked about that, and your work in police community relations and race relations as well. And certainly we know what's going on in this country right now with race relations. How do you believe that Cincinnati needs an African-American mayor?
I believe the city of Cincinnati, an African-American mayor could bring the kind of approach that recognizes the needs of the entire city, especially the needs in the African-American community. I've lived a lot of the issues that we find ourselves discussing when it comes to poverty and discrimination in the various areas, racism and all of that. I've lived that here in the city of Cincinnati. And I always say, if I can show where I came from, and here I am today representing the state of Ohio and representing District 9. In other words, if I can do it, I can be a shining example to help others do the same thing. I've always said, if you give me a fish, I'll eat for a day. But if I give you if I teach you to fish, you'll eat for a lifetime. So as a mayor who has felt the sting of poverty and how it can be devastating to a family and the children, I am one that is in the most, in the best place to be able to address these issues from the mayor standpoint. And these things are what cause all of the other problems in our city. So yes, I stand in that gap as a representative for the city. Thank you.
All right, Sharon has a question now for Mr. Pureval.
So I'm sure you've seen on social media, you've often been criticized of looking for your next job, the next highest office. Are you running for mayor because it's the easiest path forward?
No, I'm running for mayor because it has been a dark time for Cincinnati. We are in a challenging spot with COVID continuing to rage, with the ensuing economic downturn, and with corruption that is a cloud that continues to hang over City Hall and is holding our city back. It's been a dark chapter for our city, but with $290 million coming from the federal government and the end of the pandemic in sight, I am optimistic for the future. We have a once in a generation chance to get our city back on track with a new council, a new mayor, a new administration. If we work together, we can turn the page on this past chapter, set aside petty partisan squabbles and unleash the potential we all know we have. That's why I'm running for mayor, to lift up all 52 neighborhoods after COVID and grow our city into the next decade. We've got to be honest and say that the growth that we have seen this last 10 years has not been shared by everyone, particularly our Black and brown communities. So as we grow, and I'm laser focused on growth, we have to grow equitably. We have to encourage more Black ownership of homes, Black ownership of businesses, Black ownerships of neighborhoods. We've got to prioritize racial equity if we want to win the next decade. I believe I've got the track record to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pureval. Jason has a question for Mr. Begtrup.
Gavi, you've worked in Congress alongside Congresswoman Gavi Giffords, former Congresswoman Gavi Giffords, but no experience in politics, and you're going up against some real stalwarts and experienced politicians here in locally. Why not run for city council first?
You know, I'm running for mayor because I believe Cincinnati hasn't reached all its potential. I'm running for mayor because we need a leader with a vision for an equitably growing city. It's true. I don't have experience running for office. If that's what you want, there are candidates you can choose from. I have experience solving problems. I have experience leading organizations. I've led in the private sector with the businesses I've built, brought tens of millions of dollars of investment to the city, and created good jobs with livable wages and good benefits. I'm the only one in this race who has the experience of building our economy. I'm also the one in this race who has years of experience solving big policies. You know, the role of the mayor isn't, as my opponents believe, to run for another office. The role of the mayor is to serve the people of Cincinnati. When I was in Congress working with Gavi, I wrote legislation. I wrote $20 billion budgets. I've also cut checks for my own small business. So I have the experience to lead, to make a budget that works, that prioritizes people. I also have the experience bringing people together. When Gavi was in Congress, she was one of 435 votes. And what she showed me was that one vote didn't matter that much. What mattered was leading on the issues and using the power of the position to convene people to solve problems. We wrote legislation that got passed in the most divisive Congresses, bipartisan legislation, the most divisive Congresses in history. And that's what I'm going to do in Cincinnati. I don't care if I'm working with Republicans or Democrats or charterites or independents. We're going to put the people first and build a vision of a more equitable Cincinnati.
Thank you, Mr. Begtrup. Last in this segment, Sharon has our final question for Mr. Raffel Prophett.
As a firefighter, you've actually worked in the ranks of the city, right? And so you've been on that other side, probably saying, what is council and the mayor doing? So my question for you is, how many of those decisions, politics play into it? How would you keep politics out of your decision makings? And remember the firefighters, the people who work in the development department, the actual staff of the city who were once you.
That is a great question, because it really is, part of the reason why I'm running. I believe I've been in public service a combined 40 years. And the values of public service is fundamentally, it's selflessness. That means that you put others, the well-being of others beyond your own. That's what I learned in the military and on the fire department. And so as the mayor, I believe that I have the opportunity, right, to change the mindset of what political public service should be, right? Because I think that's where we've lost our way. And that's why I said that you have to explore the change in the charter, because I believe that precipitated we're getting off the course of good governance and also this value system or this value of selflessness. And so as the mayor, I will be, setting that the visions of selfless value, but also a collaborator. Again, we have a CEO, as Councilmember Mann said, that's in charge of our public safety forces, right? And so I won't have a direct relationship with them. It would be the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Prophett. Well, this has been a great conversation up to this point. We're nearing the end of our hour's worth of time, and we want to be true to our commitment to our audience and to our candidates to keep this within a 1 hour time frame. But we will definitely be following up with you guys in our coverage to continue asking the great questions we had here today, and many that we got from our readers that we did not get an opportunity to ask today. But now we'll move into our closing statements. And as I mentioned it at the beginning, each candidate will have 1 minute to make their closing case to voters. And we decided on this order at random prior to the debate. And so Mr. Begtrup will go first.
Thank you for this opportunity. You know, when I think about the future of Cincinnati, I think about my kids. I think about my little guy, Leaf, my 8-year-old Delilah, my 11-year-old Aurora. I think about the city they're going to inherit. What will it look like? Will it be a livable city? Will it be a place that's more equitable, that has addressed our history of systemic racism? Or will it be a city that's still caught in a 100-year cycle of political corruption? You know, we have problems in our city, and we're not facing them because we have career politicians more focused on their next election than they are the people of Cincinnati. I've solved problems throughout my career. I've built businesses. I've created jobs here in Cincinnati. I've also built a school. The Spencer Center serves 350 kids all over the city. It's a great example of what we can do when we focus on serving. I need your help. Democracy is not a spectator sport. I ask for your vote on May 4th, but I also ask you to join our people-powered movement at votegavi.com. Our kids deserve a better Cincinnati. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Begtrup. Next, we'll have Mr. Thomas, 1 minute to make his closing case.
Well, thank you all. First question you should ask yourselves, who in this panel have any experience anywhere near the type of experience that I have projected and attained throughout my 50 years of leadership and serving the community of this city? I bring a wealth of talent, and I always say the best experience is life experiences is your best indicator of a good leader. I was there during the civil unrest and stood in the gap to help bring our city forward. I changed diversity in the Cincinnati Police Department by recognizing and filing the first federal consent decrees that we are currently under today. You know, I've been there when a young man was shot in the streets and I was walking the community to try to save our city. I was there with that young man. He died in my arms. So no one can expect to come anywhere close to the kind of experience that I bring to this city because I love Cincinnati. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Next, with their closing argument, will be Mr. Raffel Prophett.
Yeah, thanks for the Enquirer. I was born in Cincinnati, raised here, educated here, graduating Hughes High School, undergraduate degree from University of Cincinnati, certification Cincinnati State, master's degree from Xavier, where I'm a adjunct faculty. Served on fire department in the military, 40 combined years. You know, I love this city is what my qualifications are. I decided to run because of the urgency of the moment, as King stated, with COVID and the social movement that emerged back in 2020. I just thought that the current political leaders who were seeking mayor were not up for the task. What it was going to require, it's going to require courageous, creative, and selfless leadership. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that our city will rise from this culture of corruption, from these crises, to a much brighter future for our collective future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prophett. Next, we will have Councilman Mann.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank the Enquirer for this opportunity. You know, we have a great city. Despite all the conversations in the last hour, there are a lot of good things that we should be very proud of. We want to continue to build on them, whether neighborhood activation, development, some work to reduce poverty, and all the rest. My pitch really is based on my service, and I want you to focus in closing on one thing. The city of Cincinnati is a huge enterprise. We have over 6,000 employees. We spend $1.5 billion a year. We have 17 departments providing a range of services that meet the needs of our citizens, keep them safe, provide parks and recreation, healthcare, and all the rest. We need somebody who knows how all that operates And that's important because the next council, because of term limits and other things, is going to be one of the youngest and least experienced in history. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Councilman Mann. And last, Mr. Aftab Pureval will make his closing statement.
Thanks, Kevin, Sherry, Jason, the Enquirer, and thank you all for watching at home. I believe that Cincinnati can accomplish great things. And I want the next decade to be remembered as a time of incredible growth and investment here. I want us to lift up everybody so that any child born here has the support they need to live a healthy and rewarding life. And I believe I've got the experience, the track record, and the drive to help guide us through the next chapter. Given my track record in the clerk of court's office of taking on corruption, improving government services, and saving taxpayer dollars. On my very first day, I took on the nepotism and patronage that had led to an inefficient and unrepresentative workforce. We're now diverse across the board. We're smaller. Our employees are doing more with less. We've leaned into innovation and creativity. And every single year of my term, I've given money back to the general fund, saving taxpayers millions. That's the kind of bold, progressive leadership we need in City Hall. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of the candidates for your participation today and for your thoughtful answers to the questions presented to you today. Thank you to our readers and viewers here of the Enquirer who submitted dozens of questions for our candidates today. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get to all of them, but you'll have our commitment that we will indeed follow up with these candidates in the days leading up to the election to get those answers for you. Thank you to Jason and Sherry for joining me and participating in this forum. Lastly, as the opinion editor and leader of our editorial board here at the Cincinnati Enquirer, I would just like to leave our viewers with this thought. The importance of this election in terms of the future of the city of Cincinnati. We've seen what's happened over the last couple of years here in the city of Cincinnati. And if you've been dissatisfied with the way that things have been going, with the leadership, with the corruption at City Hall, you have an opportunity to change that beginning on May the 4th in this primary election. I've heard projections that voter turnout is going to be as low as 15%. I think that's just unconscionable in a city like Cincinnati with such great promise and things to look forward to in the future. So it is my hope that you will exercise your right, your constitutional right, as a citizen of this city to go out and vote. You actually have a choice in this primary election. There are 6 candidates that you have to choose from as mayor, and out of this primary, 2 will come that you will choose from in November. But right now, you have a choice between 6 people. I would encourage you to use that opportunity and to take that voice and your vote and go out and cast it on Tuesday, May the 4th. We like to show up in big numbers for presidential elections, but the truth is that the mayor that you choose and the council that you elect this November will have a greater impact on your life than the president of the United States. So I hope that you'll exercise that right and that privilege and go out and vote on May the 4th. I'm Kevin Aldridge, and on behalf of the editor of the Enquirer, Burl Love, and all of our staff and editors, I wish you a good day. Take care.